Happy Friday, Dog Nation. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by our friends at Kroger. Hope you're getting ready to enjoy, obviously, one of the important dates in the calendar for our country, but also a fun time here this weekend as you hopefully get some time off and maybe even an extra day off on Monday. We are going to be away, and I'll tell you more about that during our show. So thank you for allowing us to enjoy some holiday time here this weekend. Hopefully you get a chance to do the same thing. But before we get there is work to be done. We are not mailing it in on today's program. A lot of different stuff. A lot of stuff to talk about around the Georgia sports world today, including, of course, a bunch of stuff on football. Jeff Sentel recruiting stuff here later on as well. We will do it all. DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger. Fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Happy Friday to all of you. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Let me say this off the very top. Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll forget to say it because I've been meaning to say this for a couple of days and haven't. This is obviously heading into Memorial Day weekend, and on Monday, we will be away. So no show from us on Monday. Hopefully for you, it's a day off as well to enjoy just a great kickoff start to the summer. We had a great time last night, kind of around the pool, last day of school for my kids, and so everybody was kind of, sort of in that summer vibe last night, and hope you're kind of in the same way here. So no show for us on Monday, but of course we'll be back again on Tuesday with the show as you've kind of come to expect it, and a lot to do before we get there. We're going to hit on a bunch of different stuff on today's show, kind of, a lot of different things going on. We kind of want to make sure we kind of touch on all of that, and I want to make sure we do, obviously, some football stuff here off the very top. I saw a very interesting stat last day or so, and I want to make sure I shared this. And sometimes when it comes to some of these stats and like the really complicated analytics, I'm always really slow to want to present some of this on the air because I think I should probably be hesitant about talking too much about something I don't completely understand, and this is certainly an example of that. But the reason why I'm okay sharing this stat, even though I kind of don't really fully understand it, because with my own eyes, what I feel like I have seen would seem to be kind of backed up by this stat a little bit, so I feel okay about that. There's been some chatter, back and forth online about, third down wide receivers, which receivers in the SEC perform best on third down, and there's a guy, I think it's called Tailgate Tent. I follow him on Twitter, pretty good follow, pretty, in-depth football information, and he shared something in terms of his own metrics that he tabulates. We'll take his word that this is all accurate. But I thought it was very interesting to see how high a Georgia wide receiver ranked on this list from Tailgate 10. Let's show this on the screen here. So here's what he says. Here are the top 20 wide receivers in third down WPC plus, which I have no idea. But he says that's value added versus a league average player at your position. In other words, how does this receiver compare to the sort of league average receiver in that same situation when it comes to making plays on third down here? And so you can see Kadarius Toney at number one. Not a huge surprise. Toney was obviously a dynamic playmaker for Florida a year ago. Even Gator haters like us can admit that. Was a first-round pick, obviously. You see a dude from Wake Forest who comes in number 2 on that list. Then you got Seth Williams from Auburn, number 3. Once again, a very good receiver. But isn't it interesting to see Kearis Jackson from Georgia coming in at 4th on this list of some sort of metric for your value on third down? And when you see the names that Jackson is ahead of, it's even more interesting. Ahead of Devontae Smith, who's 6th, ahead of even George Pickens, who's 9th. The very good receiver Elijah Moore at Ole Miss, for instance, is 10th. A lot of receiver Garrett Wilson from Ohio State's on here at this list below the level of what Kearis Jackson is. So a lot of really good receivers, and yet in Jackson's case, according to this one third down metric, he actually rates higher for how he performed on third down than some of the other top receivers in college football. And as I said before, even if I couldn't tell you in 100 words or less what WPC plus means when it comes to third down efficiency, we did see some version of this with our own eyes, right? I mean, remember how early in the season, how valuable Kearis Jackson was for Georgia, back-to-back games with 100 yards or more against SEC opponents that mattered, Auburn and Tennessee. Jackson came up big right there. And I think it's easy for me to imagine, in kind of like that unsung hero role, Jackson could do something similar for Georgia here this year. And I'll tell you one of the things, even with the uncertainty related to will George Pickens even play for Georgia in 2021? And if because you're uncertain about that, if you want to put Pickens kind of on a shelf for a moment and just sort of pretend he's not here and just sort of look at the other guys, man, you start to see what you want to see from a receiving core. You want guys to have that distinctive characteristic that sets them apart from the other guys there. You can't have, 4 or 5 guys who are all the same. You got to have the blazing speedster. That's what you hope Arian Smith can be for you. You've got to have the physical guy that's willing to go over the middle. That's what Kearis Jackson's kind of proven to be. It's one of the reasons, maybe, as this, stat dude says, that he's been so good on third down, that toughness, that physicality, that kind of Peach County vibe that Kearis Jackson gives off when he plays. Maybe that's why he has been so effective on third down. And you think about someone like Marcus Rosemy-Jackson on his way back, to full health here. He kind of has his own distinctive playing personality there as well. Dominic Blaylock, assuming that he's on his way back to health, you kind of see him kind of fitting that same, sort of mold here. That everybody's kind of got their own personality here. And obviously what we've seen in college football as of late, Devontae Smith last year for Alabama is the outlier. Devontae Smith was kind of a one-man gang for Alabama at the receiver position, with apologies to John Mechie. Devontae was kind of a one-man gang for Alabama after Jalen Waddle went down with injury. But for the most part, the dominant offenses in college football in the kind of previous years leading up to what Bama did a year ago, it's about a collection of wide receivers. In some cases, you have multiple guys having gigantic seasons. In other cases, you have a handful of guys who just have really, really good seasons. But the way to have a receiving core kind of play well and perform to the best it possibly can is to have guys who can do some different things for you. And I think that Kearis Jackson does bring his own distinct playing personality into all of this. He's tough. He's physical. He catches the ball. He's a reliable target. And as the stat guy says here that I showed you a moment ago, Tailgate Tent on Twitter, he's a guy that came up pretty big for Georgia on third down a year ago. I could expect to see him do the same thing again this year. So as you're thinking about those guys for Georgia, those weapons worth trusting and pay attention to, keep your eye on Kearis Jackson when we head towards the upcoming season. With that said, let me kind of do something completely different for a moment because, as you're well aware, we had news break on the show yesterday while we were hosting the show. The University of Georgia Athletic Association Board of Directors meetings took place, and it's still ongoing, but took place there at the Reynolds Plantation, very nice Ritz-Carlton Lodge, just on the banks of the Lake Oconee there. And new UGA Athletic Director Josh Brooks kind of putting his stamp on this Georgia program right now with some things that I think are really good and I think worth talking about here for a moment. First of all, it's nice to see Georgia kind of officially make the announcement that we assumed it would be making, joining with much of the rest of the SEC that's already done this, and obviously the Carolina Panthers, who were the stadium playing host of the Georgia-Clemson game. Full attendance is back, and not only am I excited about that, because pretty clearly we saw a year ago that fan matter. The fan presence matters. The games were, obviously less enjoyable for those who were there because of the absence of so many of the fans. But I think you can make a case that the games were just weirder on TV without that natural, genuine crowd noise. So there's a huge level of enthusiasm for the return of fans. It's kind of nice to see that happening here this year, and great to see Georgia kind of making that official announcement on this yesterday. We also talked a little bit about the fact that the press box is changing. This is kind of self-serving for media guys like me, because the press box has been a beautiful seat, a great vantage point to watch the games from, probably the best press box in terms of at least watching the game anywhere in the SEC, but obviously that real estate very valuable for those kind of premium seating options. That's what's going to happen here. That means the Georgia press box will now move to a corner of the stadium. The only way that's going to impact the average fan is once you move that press box around, rebuild it somewhere else, the stadium will start to look a little bit different. But other than that, the average fan won't be impacted by that too much. As I did say, though, on yesterday's show, that one of the things that does benefit Georgia by creating more premium seating, it actually moves some fans, ticket buyers, donors, out of other premium seating, which gives a little bit more incentive for money to be raised from those who want to donate and kind of move their way up the hierarchy for home games. A lot of donors will tell you that it's been easier to kind of get better seats for the Georgia-Florida game or get more access to road games than it has been to kind of move up the pecking order there with inside Sanford Stadium. A lot of those, the best tickets in that stadium have been held on to for generations and generations by the same people. It's been kind of hard to do that. So obviously, even though I'm a coastal elite media guy, that's sort of sad to see the press box go away. You kind of understand why Georgia wants more of those premium seating options there. But then there was this, and I think this is a really cool thing. that Georgia has also announced that it's essentially putting a cap on concession stand prices. So what's going to lead to is concessions, generally speaking, going to be much, much cheaper. I'm talking about like the basic concessions, right? Like the sodas and the hot dogs and the popcorns, I guess, the things like that. And could be, as low, I've heard, as low as like half, what it currently is. And I just think this is a really nice gesture. It won't mean a ton necessarily, but I just think it's a really nice gesture. I think it really kind of speaks to what Georgia ought to be considering right now, because the fact of the matter is, if you're trying to raise money for your program, and this is one of those things that's kind of unpleasant thing about it, but it's just true. It's way easier to get a rich dude to give $100,000 than it is to get, 10 normal people to give $10,000. Like if you're trying to raise $100,000, finding a rich person to give you the whole thing is just an easier thing to do from a donating standpoint than it is to get a whole bunch of people to give a little bit of money. That's, it's always going to be more efficient to sort of seek out rich, wealthy donors when you're trying to raise a bunch of money. But obviously there has been a little bit, I think, based on some of the fans that I've kind of heard from, a little bit of a thought of, wow, it seems like Georgia kind of obviously prioritizes these big donors, these people who are able to give a lot of money, and maybe all of a sudden I sort of feel left out. What's being done right now for the average fan? And we want to kind of run through and list all the things that have changed around Georgia football or changed around Sanford Stadium in the last few years. You certainly get the sense that there's a list of things that have just sort of made the average fan kind of feel like, well, do I still matter here? Am I still a priority for Georgia football? And we sort of had the assumption that when Josh Brooks was going to take over as UGA athletic director, that one of the things that he might, be good at is kind of bringing that sort of pro-fan perspective here and doing things that takes care of the larger number of Georgia football fans, even if it doesn't quite raise the the coffers of the donor pool all that much. This is an example of that. I really applaud Georgia here for taking that step to, hey, we're going to do something for the average fan, for that person who just cherishes those home games, maybe has to reach deep in that wallet to spend, be here, and it's a little bit of a financial stretch to be able to do that. We're going to do something to show our appreciation for the fans who are able to do that. It's actually going to cost us a little bit of money. It's really not going to make us any money to do this way, but we're just going to do it because it's seemingly the right thing to do. I think this is a really cool thing for Georgia. As it seeks out the big donors and the big bucks, and even the average fan wants Georgia to be able to do that because they want the things that come to the program when you do go out and raise money like that. But as Georgia seeks its, increased donor pool and, more resources, financial resources in the program, making those gestures to show appreciation to the average fan who's been so steadfast in his or her support for this program, I think that's a really cool thing to see too. So lower concessions at Sanford Stadium, I think is kind of a nice thing. Glad to see Josh Brooks, new athletic director, putting his stamp on the Georgia program. And frankly, I can't wait to see what he does next. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Kroger, and glad to have you here no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really glad to have you as a part of the program today, and big thanks to Kroger for making it all possible. And I love the way that Kroger has worked so hard over the course of the last, year plus, as we've kind of gone through a global pandemic, and obviously Kroger right there at the forefront of helping us keep food on our table during all of that, but also through that entire time, really working hard to take care of its employees and continue to make Kroger what it's kind of always been, which is a great place to work. And now Kroger wants to give the experience to even more people to find out why Kroger has been such a great place to work, happy employees for such a long time. If you are looking for a job, Kroger might be the place for you. Kroger's hiring for several positions right now. It's more than a paycheck. You get a big-time rewards package. I'm talking about tuition reimbursement, potentially, associate discounts, partner perks, so much more. So make sure you check this out. Go to jobs.kroger.com. I'll make sure you get the website correctly here. It's jobs.kroger.com. You can stop by that website or just go by your local Kroger store and find out what's going on right there in the store. So either the website, jobs.kroger.com, or stop by your local Kroger store and they'll take really good care of you here today. Let's go around the doghouse now. We're going to get Jeff Sentel in just a minute. We'll do a lot of recruiting. The next, several minutes of this show going to be related to recruiting. A lot of this with Jeff Sentel as per usual on a Friday. But before that, around the doghouse, and I Do want to go back in time just a little bit. This is an audio clip we've played for you before here on DawgNation Daily presented by Kroger, and it actually originates from Jeff Sentel's weekly recruiting show Before the Hedges, which is also presented by Kroger. Denylon Morissette, 4-star wide receiver, UGA commit. When he made his pledge to UGA, one of the things that kind of got some attention was the fact that Jeremiah Alexander, big-time edge rusher out of the state of Alabama, had been active on social media saying, hey, wherever Morissette goes, I'm going to go there as well. And obviously, we like the idea of 5-stars saying they might be coming to Georgia. Social media messages like that are always going to get our attention on this show. And so I was glad that Jeff asked Morissette about Jeremiah Alexander and how real Morissette thought it could be with Alexander potentially being in the fold for UGA. Keep in mind, Morissette lives here in the state of Georgia. He's going to be going to North Cobb High School this year. Alexander's from the state of Alabama. So these are not, hometown guys necessarily, but they are guys who've kind of gotten to know each other. And Morissette has told us before that he believes that, the big-time 5-star prospect, being at Georgia, very much a possibility. Here is a reminder from Denylon Morissette.
Oh, yes, sir.
Where does that come from? I mean, how are you linked up with that kid in Alabama?
Man, it's just we got connections everywhere. We've been top players know each other. That's all I can say. Just top players around the country know each other. And we're going to pull him in, though, for sure.
Do you think Georgia has a chance with him, and why?
Oh, yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Me and him, we be on the phone, so I definitely do. I can't say why. I don't want to tell his business, but I definitely do.
What kind of addition would he be to the class if he did choose Georgia?
Oh, if he do choose Georgia, we'll stay number 1 class. So I hope he does.
So good stuff there from Denylon Morissette. I've told y'all before, I like the idea of Morissette's claim, hey, listen, top players going to know each other, and you probably do get the sense of that the, just the modern connections of whether it be DMs on social media or the text chain threads and things like that. These guys do have a chance to meet each other through the magic of those smartphones in a way that recruits of previous generations would not be able to do. And Morissette, in no uncertain terms there, says, yes, I absolutely believe it's a realistic possibility that Jeremiah Alexander could be at the University of Georgia. Well, lo and behold, here this week at DawgNation.com, we have seen an update from Jeff Sentel regarding Jeremiah Alexander. Alexander, in his own words, talking about his feelings with Georgia. Let me show you this quote on the screen. I'll read this to you. As Alexander's asked how he feels about UGA right now, and he says, I like Georgia a lot. They were one of the schools that never really got off my back when I committed to Alabama, meaning at one point in time, Alexander was an Alabama commit, and he says Georgia remained kind of steadfast in recruiting me there at the time. He says, so I will always have love for Georgia. And one of the things in the same interview with Jeff Sentel that Alexander mentioned is also something that you heard Denylon Morissette mention in his audio clip a moment ago, the fact that, both these guys, Morissette a current pledge to Georgia, Alexander a current recruiting target, they've noticed that Georgia is the number 1 class in the country. There's some clear momentum around the class of 2022 right now, and Alexander says, yeah, you better believe I'm paying attention to that. I have noticed that, and so all of a sudden, as we head towards June and what is a gigantic month for UGA recruiting with seemingly more and more 5-stars by the day kind of in the mix for Georgia here, I guess, based on Alexander there. And you can read the full story at DawgNation.com. I want to talk to Jeff Sentel about this coming up in a moment. I guess you have to sort of add Alexander into the mix here of some of those big names that Georgia is definitely on its way to pursuing. Before I bring on Jeff, and as we wrap up around the doghouse here, let me also tell you about my friends at the Finish Long Drink. Told you, at least I think I told our video audience this before the show started. Pool party last night, last day of school for the kids. And, for me right now, that means the Finish Long Drink. And I've loved introducing this to the people in my neighborhood because it comes ready to drink right out of the can. And so, this time of year when you're relaxing with, back deck, patio, pool, whatever else, something that's easy to drink, ready to drink, something that doesn't require a lot of mixing, and you don't have to be a mixologist to create concoction with. Obviously, that's perfect for this time of year, and that's what the Finish Long Drink is. It kind of comes to us from Finland. It's been huge over there for decades. It's been in the United States now for a couple of years, and now it's in the state of Georgia. There's a lot of different options here. There's like 4 different varieties. You've got the traditional organic that comes in the blue can. It's kind of like a grapefruit gin combination. You've got the Long Drink Zero, which, as it sounds like, no sugar, no carbs and all of that. You got the Long Drink Strong, which is 8.5% alcohol by volume. That's a really good thing. And obviously the cranberry flavor there as well, which the students over at UGA love. This has been a big deal in the Athens bars there now for a while. There's a ton of buzz about this. You need to find it out for yourself, and the best way to do that is to go to this website, thelongdrink.com, and you can find out where it's for sale near you, whether it be a bar or a beverage store or whatever else. Thelongdrink.com. You can find that out there and kind of figure out where you can kind of pick some of that up. It's great. It's a great thing here this summer, the finished long drink, ready to drink right out of the can. A lot of different choices, a lot of different varieties. Hope you enjoy all of that. Okay, before we're done today, busy stuff around the SEC that we want to get to, including, I guess, a scenario for Alabama and its schedule that I hadn't fully considered yet, but could come into play in determining, kind of what the SEC championship looks like, what's the playoff race looks like. We'll do a lot of that before we're done on today's show. But for now, on everything related to UGA recruiting, bunch of stuff going on, heading for a busy month. Let's do that with Jeff Sentel right now as we go on the road with him, assisted by AAA.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Let's say hello to Jeff Sentel here on the road, assisted by AAA. Really good story this week at DawgNation.com, stopping by to visit Jeremiah Alexander, his hometown. I believe it's Alabaster, Alabama, if I have that correct, for Jeremiah Alexander, and obviously a guy that, as we played the audio before, friends with UGA wide receiver commit to Nylan Morissette. And Jeff, I find all of this to be really interesting. I mean, obviously, I'm always kind of skeptical of, package deals, things like that. But as Morissette has said, top players know each other. And it seems like right now that one of the biggest names in the class of 2022, certainly one of the top prospects in the state of Alabama, Alexander, based on the story that you wrote at DawgNation.com, one of the quotes that we shared a moment ago, it certainly seems like Georgia's in play here for Alexander right now. This actually hasn't happened in a while. I feel like this used to happen a decent amount. So we'll get Jeff back on the phone here and get him rolling on all of this. And there's a lot to do with Jeff from that recruiting standpoint. So we'll look forward to being able to do that. And look forward to taking a lot of your comments during our show today there as well, as we kind of just talk about everything, related to UGA recruiting and everything that's going on there. Alexander, I will ask Jeff about the high-profile transfer targets that we've talked about over the course of the last couple of days, whether it be former Clemson defensive back Darian Kendrick or Rick Gilbert. We'll kind of find out, what Jeff thinks about that as a potential roster addition. But Jeff is back ready to go with us again. So, Jeff, I was setting you up to talk about Jeremiah Alexander there, your recent visit with him. Very good story at DawgNation.com. Certainly seems like right now UGA is in the mix here with another big-time five-star name. There's a lot of that these days. Alexander, one of the more prominent considerations, I guess.
Yeah, Brandon, good morning. Happy Friday, everybody. Let me tell you something about Jeremiah, and I hope it came across in the story this week. Folks, I go visit a lot of players, and even these All-Americans, they don't, believe it or not, they don't treat every practice rep like they're trying to get their first offer. When you see a guy that is as talented as Jeremiah Alexander is, and then you see him just try to chisel out everybody around him on the team and make them a lot better. That's the young man has a very bright future. Of course, he's a five-star. People are going to go roll their eyes and going to say, well, Jeff, of course this guy's going to be a good player. He's a five-star. He has all the tools. What I'm telling you about Jeremiah Alexander is he has a lot more in his bag than that. There are a lot of special elements to his game. He's that right kind of mean on the field where he's just trying to work and make everybody better. He's relentless. I can't tell you how many times his offensive coaches got in trouble because their linemen were letting him hit the quarterback even in a kind of a tempo practice one-on-one period. He plays on a team, Brandon, that was when you take out IMG Academy, because I do consider that a boarding school, and you look at just pure high schools that don't select their own players. Thompson High, after its second straight state title, finishes the number 2 team in the country. And it certainly seems that there's a lot of interest there in Georgia and Clemson and Alabama, and I think that's all anybody can ask for at this stage.
Yeah, I guess take me back here a little bit, when he, I guess, makes his decommitment from Alabama. I know you wrote about that a little bit at DawgNation.com. What was kind of his mindset about kind of wanting to open things back up and make sure he made more room for more considerations?
It just felt, Brandon, he felt too much pressure. He knew that his sole focus should be on his team and his teammates and winning his second consecutive state title. And he got tired of having to, I guess when everybody identified him on the local highlights or even in media reports, oh, that's Alabama, future Alabama standout, future Crimson Tide defensive end, future Crimson Tide linebacker. He thought it took too much focus off of his current team, and he's a guy that likes to just be where he's at right now, be very ever-present. And he thought it relaxed him, thought it relaxed his mood, because he didn't want to always be thinking about his future in Alabama when he had some really important work to do in the present. And you can't really denigrate a kid that feels that way, especially if it helps him perform at his peak ability. And Jeremiah is a guy most people would say, "Oh my gosh, nobody's gonna really ever pull a kid like that out of Alabama, especially a former Alabama commitment." But with Jeremiah, there's a lot of little things. Like, he's going to visit Clemson and Georgia right out of the box on June 1st. Georgia's getting the second visit on June 3rd. And he told me really basically the school that's won his pandemic recruiting was Clemson. They offered him really late because they didn't think that they were going to pull a kid like Jeremiah Alexander out of Alabama. And yet now there's a good shot. I mean, he's been in contact with the core group of Georgia commits, Brandon, for quite some time. Marquise Groves Killebrew, Big Bear Alexander, guys like that. And then there's also this newest development. Well, I guess we can't call it new because they've known each other for a long time already, a couple of seasons already. But there's definitely some chemistry there brewing with Denylin Morissette as well.
Yeah, that's a fun thing to think about. Something else that's been interesting, a really good interview from this past Wednesday on Before the Hedge, presented by Kroger with Branson Robinson. And I guess I learned a lot from watching this interview. And one of the things that I wasn't quite aware of is, I think of a couple of UGA commits, guys like Jalen Walker and Malachi Starks being these like really mature guys. And, right now Robinson's a recruiting target. He's not a UGA commit. But if you kind of, hypothesize for a moment that he could be in their recruiting class, I'm not quite so sure that Robinson's maturity level doesn't at least match what they bring to the table, if not exceed that. I mean, he kind of comes across as a guy that if you told me he was a coach recruiting other players, I believe I might believe that. Just really, seemingly very well grounded, but also just kind of a guy that just kind of comes across as a guy who's been in college for a couple of years, more so than someone who's just getting ready to go into a senior year. I really liked a lot of what I heard from Branson Robinson today. We talked about Robinson a little bit last Friday when you were on the show because you had obviously written about him, and I knew you had visited with him. But to get a chance to see the interview last night, I guess I didn't quite realize the level of kind of off-field and tangible qualities that he was bringing to the table. Hard not to watch that interview and come away an even bigger fan of a guy who's already got the on-field credentials to be running back at a place like Georgia. But he really appears to be bringing a lot more to the table than that.
Yeah, Brandon, I can get down with that. I can dig that. I mean, really, he's a grown man physically. Everybody knows that. But, what we try to do with our reporting is to try to see what he's like beyond that. And Brandon, man, there's a whole big ball of wax here. I mean, he's a guy that his older brother, there's a lot of things people don't know about Branson, and we're going to write soon on DawgNation.com, but his older brother is a really accomplished track sprinter. So for those that really wonder, he's at Alcorn State, just about to graduate from Alcorn State. And for those that, one of the people wonder is, is Branson Robinson too thick? Is he too much like a rhino and not enough like a cheetah? Well, you look at him, and his older brother, Brandon, he's running 10.2s. He's extremely fast times as a 100-meter, 60-meter, 200-meter type guy. And he's a guy that's got track background in his family, even though he's built like the proverbial poster for your favorite weight gain or muscle and fitness magazine cover. But I mean, Branson's got a lot in his bag, as the kids would say. I mean, he physically looks the part, but you see the way he acts, his mannerisms, the way he carries himself. There's a lot of good stuff off the field that we're going to get to share on DawgNation.com about Branson Robinson, his family makeup. Both of his parents own their own businesses. They're self-employed. This is a really dialed-in young man.
The other thing is, and obviously we've seen the way that like Derrick Henry's dominating the NFL the last couple of years. He's kind of the gold standard for what that featured running back kind of looks like in football right now. And when you see how big Robinson is, and he's clearly prolific in the weight room, and obviously he's using that to great effect in the football field there as well. I mean, it is a little bit easy to kind of say, wow, that's one of those guys that could have some of those, dominant, plowing folks over, Derrick Henry style runs at a place like Georgia. I know Georgia kind of missed out on Henry the first time around when he chose Alabama, but when you see a guy like Robinson, how big and strong that he is, and he said before he's also got some kind of speed credentials go along with that. Boy, it's easy to let your mind wander about, just how good a guy like that could be.
Yeah, and Brennan, the names that get thrown around, it's pretty funny. He embraces the Nick Chubb comparison. A lot of the genesis of his athletic ability, Brandon, actually goes back to being inspired by Herschel Walker. So there's a lot of Georgia connections there that we've written before, but this is how good this guy is. When the Georgia folks see a Nick Chubb, and then maybe a little bit of shades of the early development of Herschel Walker, those are very good things. They may be lofty, out of this world, bonkers comparisons, but then when he hears from Alabama, Brandon, Alabama uses Mark Ingram as the model, as the template for what type of back they think he can be. When you're face to face with him, Brandon, I think he's probably about 5'10". I don't know if I'd call him 5'11", and he's every bit of 220. It looks like his lower torso belongs on an action figure. I think we use that term for Trey Hill a lot when you just kind of see just how gargantuan his lower trunk looks like. But when you see all these name game comparisons from a lot of these major programs, and they're going to some of the best running backs in their history and Heisman Trophy winners, and it doesn't feel like you're getting in front of your skis at all either when you're making these comparisons. No. I mean, this guy really is grade A.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. One more thing about Robinson, we'll change the subject here. I also really like the things he had to say about Dell McGee there as well. McGee's been around for a while, and I think Georgia fans have gotten used to his recruiting success. But when you hear a guy, and we played some of this audio yesterday on our show from your video interview that I hope people will see and watch the entire thing from. When you hear the ways in which Robinson feels that connection to McGee that goes beyond just football, I do think you're reminded once again of just how valuable an asset that Georgia running backs coach Dell McGee remains for this program.
Yeah, I mean, I think the quickest way to say that, Brandon, is he's got a luxury, premium, elite, top-tier product to sell, which would be RB1, RB2, RB3 at the University of Georgia. And yet he's so very good at what he does. And even in a field of guys and men that are supposed to be able to bond and mesh with these guys very quickly. I know sometimes everybody looks at Trey Scott and everybody looks at, certain position recruiters, and it's kind of that what you've done for me lately. But consistently, Dell McGee has been the gold standard for Georgia, not only just recruiting guys, bringing them guys in, bringing the right guys in, but developing them, knowing what to look for. I mean, Brendan, there's about 6 guys in this 2022 class that would love to be heavily courted by Georgia right now, but the thing is, Dell's only working about 2 or 3 names in this class because it is a very, very, very choicey, very premium, Dell's got his guys, and he's not going to deviate from his guys.
All right, I want to ask you about some other big news here this week, how it could impact the Georgia roster. A moment before that, though, let me remind you, we're on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sentel here today. And, of course, when I'm on the road, and I am going to be on the road this weekend, I'm thankful to have my AAA membership because I love their legendary roadside assistance. If something goes wrong, I know they're going to be there for me. And a lot of you, when you think of AAA, you think about that. But let me also convince you that when you think about AAA, you should also think about auto insurance as well. Because when you switch and save with AAA, those who do save on average $529. That's a big deal. So check out this website. It's AAA.com/auto insurance. That's AAA.com/auto insurance. And switch and save today when it comes to AAA. All right, so, Jeff, let me ask you about this. A lot of chatter on this show the last couple of days about high-profile potential transfers. Georgia's still seemingly in the mix for a guy like Darian Kendrick, for instance. Actually, let me do these one at a time. Let me start with Kendrick here for a moment. It certainly doesn't seem like that rumor mill has quieted down at all. If anything, it's probably heated up. Obviously, there's some mitigating factors here when it comes to his off-field stuff and things like that. But it certainly seems like right now Georgia kind of involved in this Kendrick situation whenever and wherever this kind of comes to a head. It seems like Georgia's in play for this right now, does it not?
Yeah, Brandon, it does because it's the depth chart opening. It's the chance to win a national title. It's the big exposure vehicle type school where, there's a lot of good things that can happen. And some of those draft pundits kind of view Kendrick as basically a first, second, third round type cornerback. Well, in the eyes of maybe Georgia fans and DawgNation, well, that might be an even swap for maybe a guy like Stokes or a guy like Campbell, either or. So that's potentially good news. But, kind of speaking about, getting out of your skis a little bit, or I don't understand the way this news works sometimes, the way the news cycles work sometimes. For me, the big story is what's the status of the charges? And everybody can say, oh, it sounds like they're going to be dropped. It feels like they're going to be dropped. But I think the charges still need to be dropped, and he needs to be in a better position with that potential legal pitfall he was in before everybody starts putting him on rosters and thinking about who he's going to guard in that opening game against a very familiar foe in Clemson. Kendrick's there. I think that smoke is real, but I think I'd like to see that first thing happen before everybody starts putting him on the Georgia roster.
And I can certainly understand that, and I guess there are rumblings out there that is what's going to happen. I mean, listen, this kind of stuff happens all the time, even for guys who are not athletes. That when you have that kind of brush with the law or whatever else. I mean, a lot of jurisdictions aren't looking to necessarily drop the hammer on you just for, kind of one thing here. So, to me, I'm not a lawyer, although, we certainly have plenty of lawyers that we're connected with here on this show that, kind of working through some of this kind of stuff. Sometimes I would suggest it's maybe not quite as hard as the average person thinks because, listen, a lot of these jurisdictions are trying to find some sort of pathway to kind of help people if they, have a little bit of a brush with the law. You don't want to condemn somebody who's, young and, maybe did something he wishes was a little bit different.
Yeah, and Brendan, I want to say this kind of really clearly on this whole subject. I had a discussion about this with my forum folk on the Sentel's Hurry Up Intel thread on our DawgNation forum. But for me, and I guess this is going to make me sound like a little kind of like get with the times, bro. Maybe like people need to tell me this, but I think it bothers me a little bit, Brandon, that should Georgia potentially win that natty, as Kendall Milton likes to say, and they bring the whole thing home. I don't, and I realize it's college football now, but for me, if you look at Georgia potentially, and they have a big name offensive transfer, they have as it stands right now, at least a transfer in the secondary from West Virginia, a transfer from Alabama, and potentially now another transfer from Clemson. This to me feels a little bit like the Old West, while college football in the portal now is the Wild West. And I'm sure I've heard from a lot of people that said, Jeff, I don't care if they come from Uganda. I don't care if they come from Wakanda. I don't care if they come from Antarctica. I don't care where they come from. As long as they put the G on the helmet and they win those games, then that's going to be worth celebrating for, I would imagine, a large portion of the fan base. And I get that, Brandon. But to me, on this whole topic, the way the roster was built last year, it's still always going to be the preference. It's going to feel a little bit more pure about building and developing towards a national championship. Now, I know probably in the minority here, but that's just how I feel. To me, it would be a little bit different to me if Georgia wins it all with so many one-year rental-type players on their way to the NFL.
So I guess the only thing I'd say back in response to that is, when you look at the aggressive way in which Alabama is collecting recruits through the recruiting process, I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying that they are compiling talent as strongly as they ever have under the Nick Saban era. The idea that you wouldn't use every arrow in your quiver to also do the same thing, I think that, to mix metaphors here, I think you're tying one hand behind your back if that's what you do. Listen, I love the idea of a guy signing with Georgia out of high school and watching him grow and develop over the course of 3 or 4 years, and the kind of increased fanhood that you have for that player as he's doing that. I'm all in favor of that. And frankly, I'm a little skeptical about how rampant the talk of the transfer portal has become in college football. But if it's going to exist and the teams that Georgia's playing against are doing everything they can to make their teams as talented as possible, then I guess as a fan of Georgia, I want to see them use that there as well. And I think it's fair to point out here that let's say that Kendrick does come to Georgia. We'll get to the Rick Gilbert thing in a moment. But let's say that Kendrick does come to Georgia. We're still talking about a small portion of this roster being the one-year rental players, the overwhelming majority of the team, even if you want to include JT Daniels as one of those transfer portal guys, even though he's now been here for a little while. I mean, the overwhelming majority of this team are still guys who kind of came up through the program, recruited out of high school by UGA. I mean, certainly this is not the kind of rent-a-player type thing you see going on in college basketball. I mean, the overwhelming ratio for Georgia would still be guys that were brought in through the more traditional means.
I agree, and I guess my feeling on this, Brandon, is everybody's doing it. I mean, listen to all the players you can roll off that have made impactful legacies on their program that came through the transfer portal. You got Cam Newton, you got Joe Burrow, you got Kyler Mayfield, you got Kyler Murray, you got Baker Mayfield. I think the list goes on and on. Alabama last year with Landon Dickerson. It's part of college football. I mean, if this was a NASCAR show, Brandon, it would be about an adjustment made to engines where if you're going to do something with your restrictor plate that everybody else is doing, that's what you have to do to keep up with in order to win championships and be at the peak of the field. I get it. I understand it. This is what college football is now, and it's not going to change. But that doesn't mean I have to love it. I don't know if I really love it the way it's evolving right now.
If you want to get into skepticism about the portal, I'm right there with you on that. One more name in all this, though, and this came up on yesterday's show. I had completely given up on the idea of a Rick Gilbert. And, Jeff, you know how big of a fan I am of Gilbert as a player. I just think he's a spectacular prospect. I'd completely given up on the idea of Gilbert landing at Georgia because there just wasn't a lot of substance, connecting him to Georgia, even after he left Florida, or it just seemed like it was more wishful thinking than anything. But lo and behold, now that's back on the conversation again, and I'm obviously not in a position to say how real it is or it isn't, but it's unmistakably a part of the online chatter here at the moment. What do you make of the fact that the Gilbert rumor mill may not be quite played out and not completely dead yet?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I guess I would call it misinformation there about Gilbert, and I guess speculation would lead to a lot of that. But here's what I know. I know people very close to Eric, and they say he's in a great place. They say he's back. It said that's the Gilbert they remember from his days when he was a dominant Gatorade Player of the Year nationally, or at least in the state of Georgia, when he was coming out of Marietta High School. And those are all really, really good things. And now when Eric's kind of back and he's moving forward with a lot of things in his life, now it's like, is it eligibility? Is it, can he play right away? Is, getting to a new school? Is it going back to LSU because that seems the easier path? Or is it a new break? The thing that comes to my mind with Eric is if you see him recently, Brandon, if you see him work out, you see what he looks like physically. He's the type of guy to me that's only one season away from the NFL. He looks like he could be an NFL player right now. And, I mean, eventually I think he might be the type of player that's only like, a fall away from becoming a very rich man one day.
Yeah, Terrence Edwards was with us yesterday. He talked about that. And obviously he's worked out with him, the physical characteristics that he's bringing to the table right now. Very impressed with that. If you don't mind me asking, you mentioned the idea of some misinformation. What is the misinformation that's out there with Gilbert at the moment?
I guess it was like, he was making the move back home to set up his next move. Well, that really wasn't the case at all. Or he was coming. He had things in his life he had to figure out, and location was going to lead one school versus another. I remember, I think Terrence and I were both there that day when we were watching him work out, and Terrence had an opinion, very strong opinion, that if Gilbert was in this current NFL draft class, the only NFL tight end that could probably, from a scouting perspective, be rated ahead of him, he thought that would be Kyle Pitts, and that's how impressed Terrence was with where he was at physically and what he looked like. I think, a lot of people thought, and I guess the misinformation trail started with, he's leaving LSU, and everybody thought, he's going back home, and that's a quick move. That's a quick move to Georgia. He eventually ends up at Florida. I think at least some of the speculation about him trending back to Florida has certainly died down a little bit. I just never thought, like a lot of people, that instantly went, he's coming to Georgia with every little piece of information they hear. That's never really felt grounded to me at all.
Yeah, what I've speculated on, and we'll wrap up the conversation after this, and this is just speculation, it certainly seems likely that Georgia is trying to recruit Gilbert, but much like it was coming out of high school, I'm just still not quite so sure how interested Gilbert is in Georgia. If I were to read the tea leaves and all the rumors and reports that are out there, that's kind of my takeaway. For good reason, it seems like Georgia's recruiting him. Just not quite so sure. Even if Gilbert's in a position to accept an offer from Georgia, I'm just not quite so sure yet that's indeed what he's going to do. Does that seem like a fair read of the situation?
Yeah, and for me, I think it's complicated with Georgia because unless, here's the magic piece, unless Georgia just looks at his skill set and goes, you know what, the 40 time, the way he operates in and out of his breaks, his ability to go get a ball, the physicality, the fact that you're going to have to double him in a lot of tight spaces, that's a lot of similarities there to George Pickens. Now, of course, probably can't high point or be as explosive with that catch radius that Pickens has, but man, he's a much more skilled and polished receiver than George Pickens has shown so far in the college ranks. For me, that seems a lot more better of a seamless fit if it was Georgia than just the tight end. Because I don't think, we used to say, Brandon, so many times with Gilbert, what can Georgia show him that will progress him and develop him for the NFL at the tight end position? Right now, I don't know if that's the position. I think besides all that, I think it would complicate a lot of potential exclamation points for Georgia's offense in 2021. Because, Ben, I know how you think, and I know you're like, man, come on down. We'll get another one. We'll just load the barn with as many great players as you can. But there's some special things that I think can happen at the tight end position from a guy like Darnell Washington, a guy like Brock Bowers. Let's not forget John Fitzpatrick. So if you drop Gilbert into that mix as, even a flex in, a guy that goes back and forth, I think it complicates a lot of things with guys in their future arcs at Georgia, not less to mention the fact that a guy like Oscar Delp is looking at that tight end position for Georgia really hard and is wanting to see the type of things that a guy like Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington can do with catches and usage and everything else like that. That's kind of the way I look at things with Eric and a potential fit at Georgia. I don't know if it's at tight end anymore.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I view him more as a comp for George Pickens than anything else that probably Georgia has at the tight end spot. We've tried to make that around here pretty clear. It's very interesting stuff, Jeff, and I know you've got a lot more on this recruiting world over the course of the days to come. Obviously, June going to be a red-hot month for UGA recruiting. We'll get a chance to read about that at DawgNation.com this weekend, and then we'll be in that month watching all these visits play out as Georgia tries to maintain its momentum for its classes of 2022 and 2023. Very fascinating times around the program as the current state of UGA recruiting is red-hot, arrow definitely pointing up. And that's before you even mention some of these transfer portal names. Jeff, great stuff. Thanks for being on the road, assisted by AAA with us here today, and we will look forward to speaking to you next week. Hope you enjoy your holiday weekend.
Yeah, guys, I got two stories planned. One, you're going to learn a lot about my next story that I'm going to write about Branson Robinson, which kind of sets a narrative on a lot of things. Could he commit early? What does his family think about all of that? Also going to have a pretty good piece coming up on Richard Young, that probably the biggest early June 1st visitor that Georgia's going to get. Richard Young is the nation's #1 tailback for the 2023 cycle. So we're going to start really diving into a lot of those guys that visit each day come June 1st. So I'm glad you guys will be around, and we look forward to bringing it to you.
Jeff, great stuff. Thanks for being here. We'll talk to you again next week.
Yes, sir. Have a happy Memorial Day, B.A.
You too.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Really good stuff from Jeff Sentel there, kind of wrapping up the week for us before a holiday weekend. And, it's kind of interesting. I always think about language around this Memorial Day time of year, and I'm not super legalistic. Like, I'm not one of these people that, is the word police and, looking to kind of jump on, misusage of any kind of word, any kind of context. But Memorial Day is one of those things where, in our society, I would say it means two completely different things, right? On the one hand, it is a happy, joyous holiday weekend. My family's looking to travel here a little bit this weekend. Kids just out of school. We're looking to kind of celebrate and enjoy all of that. And obviously, Memorial Day means that for so many of us. But kind of concurrent to that, parallel to all of that, it is also, I think, one of the most poignant, meaningful days in our calendar, because it's not just a day to celebrate those who've served our country. It's to actually celebrate those and honor those, maybe the better way to say that, who have given their life in service to our country, which is completely different and an entirely different level of significance on all of that. So I'm sure many of you are kind of much like me on this. You try to do both, right? You try to keep the happy Memorial Day vibe of, hey, it's outdoor cookouts and it's swimming pools and it's baseball and it's all the things that kind of go along with that. Yet at the same time, it is also, one of the most heavy, meaningful days on our calendar because obviously the freedoms we all get to enjoy, that came with a price. And for some people, the price was their life. And, I've got people in my kind of bloodline, my family tree that lost their life in service. Many of you much the same way, and for you it's actually even closer relatives than maybe me on that. That's a very, very serious thing. So in observance of one of the most poignant days on our calendar, but also in celebration of one of the happiest weekends of the year, we'll try to do both here as a part of that on DawgNation Daily. I'm glad you give us a chance to do that. By the way, speaking of everything going on with DawgNation Daily, we'll get to our SEC through here in a moment. Let me give a shout out to Second Chance Law before we get there. secondchance.law, that's the website. And obviously, I've been telling you about them now for a while. I think you're becoming a little bit acquainted with what they do. Fortunately, I'm not, super smart, so the fact that their name pretty much tells you the whole thing is very helpful for me. secondchance.law. For those people who want a second chance, in my life, I've been grateful for some second chances that I've gotten. I like extending those to other people. That's what secondchance.law gives you a chance to do. So if you got a criminal conviction, something that's kind of hanging over your head a little bit, that's hurting your chances of getting the job you want, or in maybe some cases hurting your chance of getting to live where you want to live, my friends at secondchance.law can help you with that, because there are actually some new laws in place in Georgia that make it a little easier to get some sort of criminal convictions kind of restricted off your record, but it's confusing. Secondchance.law has an online quiz. Answer the questions, and you can determine your eligibility. And if you're not eligible, they can help you get eligible. One of the partners, big-time UGA, two-time graduate, former Redcoat, long-time listener of DawgNation Daily, so it's fun to be able to recommend them. Secondchance.law. Make sure you check them out here today. All right, couple of things. And I kind of like stories like this. CBSSports.com has this. Is it Tom Fornelli who wrote this? I think it's Tom Fornelli who wrote this. Basically, a week-by-week look at the games that matter most for the college football playoff for the upcoming schedule. And obviously, Georgia Clemson's on there for week one. By the way, we also found out some more TV times for Georgia here this week, too. The 3:30 start for UAB week 2, and then South Carolina gets to be a night game. But that Clemson game to begin the season, big game for college football playoff meaning. Fornelli writes about that. He also says, the way that some people do, that the stakes may not be quite as high as they seem. I've told you before that I still think the winner of this game matters. I think the loser of this game is put into a tougher position for making the college football playoff, because we've seen that second-best SEC team excluded from the playoff before. It's been Georgia before, in fact, if you want to go back to 2018. So getting that trophy theoretically against Clemson, I still think really matters. The winner of this game, I think, puts themselves in a good playoff position there week one. But, Fornelli mentions that as one of those games that will determine the fate of the college football playoff. He also mentions Georgia-Florida as well. But I want to highlight something else just for a moment, because until I read this article, I hadn't fully considered this. A very interesting back-to-back game scenario for Alabama. Week 5 and Week 6 coming there in the month of October. It's Week 5 hosting Ole Miss for Alabama. That was a game last year in Oxford that was very close. Many of you are pretty high on Lane Kiffin. We had Stephen Lass from Marathon Sports touting Matt Corral, the Ole Miss quarterback, the other day. There are a lot of folks who kind of look at Ole Miss as being a little bit of an interesting, kind of sneaky surprise type team in the SEC. Well, Alabama hosts them. It's a little bit of a revenge game for Alabama because the defense played terribly there a year ago in Oxford. But how about the following week? After hosting Ole Miss, which could be a little bit of an emotional game, could be one of those games that Alabama has to score a bunch to win. Now Alabama the following week has to go to Texas A&M. Now, Vegas and the other online sports books are telling us right now that Alabama's still a double-digit favorite on the road there at Texas A&M, but this is also one of the bigger games in the SEC. Connor Riley was mentioning this the other day, that that's kind of set up to be that prime-time SEC game on CBS. Interesting to think about the emotional span of 8 days there. Hosting Ole Miss, you may have to score a bunch to win that game. Now going on the road for an A&M team that definitely has you circled. That's a very interesting stretch for Alabama. And Alabama as it tries to repeat as a national champion. We may learn a lot about the Crimson Tide there over that 8-day stretch, consecutive Saturdays against both Ole Miss and Texas A&M. Another example of just how deep the SEC West is, the fact that a lot of these teams in that division have those very tough week after week stretches on all of that. By the way, speaking of schedules, we also got this week an update on the bowl schedule there as well, including the college football playoff, which will be back on New Year's Eve again, which, for most people, that's not a good thing. The ratings will obviously be hurt by this. We've seen that before. I'm sort of at a stage of my life where New Year's Eve, kind of amateur night, it's not a big deal for me necessarily the way that it would have been maybe when I was much younger. But if you're kind of thinking about this and planning for Georgia on this, think about these two bowls as your playoff bowls for this year. Orange Bowl, that's one of the semifinal games there on December 31st. That's the earlier game. And then you got actually we haven't determined yet what time those will be. But then the Cotton Bowl in Dallas is the other national semifinal game. So Georgia hasn't been in the Cotton Bowl since after the 83 season, I don't think. When was the last time Georgia was in the Orange Bowl? Was that the 40s, like 1940-something or something like that? So those are the two playoff games this year, Orange and Cotton Bowl on that. And by the way, if you want to really look ahead, national championship game will be in Indianapolis this year. I think about there's a great steakhouse in Indianapolis, St. Elmo's. I mean, how much do you want to be eating that St. Elmo's the night before that national championship game on a Sunday night or a Saturday night, something along those lines? Connor really shaking his head no. Let me tell you something. That'll be a nice meal to enjoy. Hopefully Georgia right there in Indianapolis, getting ready for all that. Indianapolis, a little bit of frankly, Indianapolis in January, a little bit of a weird spot for a college football playoff national championship game. But if that's where the game is going to be played, that's where you want Georgia to be. One more story to get through here, and I promise I'm not going to do very much on this because it sort of feels like if you talk too much about this, you kind of get into like the political stuff a little bit more than we want to around here. But there's a big push in Congress, and it's come out in the last day or so. It's kind of in the Senate and the House related to kind of turning college athletes into employees, which obviously give them the chance to unionize. And listen, this is a complicated issue. I won't pretend to, even though I've got opinions on it, I won't pretend to be an expert on this necessarily. However, there's one particular aspect of this I want to highlight, and this is the thing at a certain point in time we're going to have to talk more about. It's not very fun to talk about today because it's the Friday before a holiday weekend. Nobody wants to get into something too heavy. But one of the Congress people who's leading the push for this stuff, change to the way in which we kind of characterize college athletes, one of the Congress people on the House of Representatives side says, it's time to finally end amateurism as we know it. One sentence. I think that sentence fairly well capsulizes the feeling of a lot of people. That they look at the college system and they say, oh, this amateurism is more like shamateurism. You've heard that said before. And we need to end this system as we know it. Treat the players like employees and, let them unionize, let them, all that kind of stuff. That's what we need to kind of push for. And listen, different people can feel different ways on this. I have respect for people who feel differently than me. But I do want to make it very, very clear here that if the goal and the push by elected representatives is to end amateurism as we know it, I want to make it very clear that I'm absolutely on the opposite side of that. I still believe in the idea of college sports as amateurism, the system that's been in place in college football for 150 years and the other college sports there as well. I still believe this system works far more often than it doesn't. Works for the players who play it, for the coaches who make their living coaching in it, for the fans who are entertained by it. I still believe the system works. And I think when you travel around and you meet high school football players who are just dying for a chance to play, or baseball players who want their chance, softball players, whatever else, I think by and large, the public at large also think it kind of works as well. So at a certain point in time, they're going to have to be battle lines drawn on this. And if the college football people or the NCAA people, if they want to continue to exist in 20 to 25 years, they're going to have to fight for their right to exist against people who are making it very clear they want the system to disappear. They want the current system to go away. They want that gone. May have to fight against that sometime in the future, at least worth pointing out today. Let me also quickly say before we wrap up here, busy weekend for Georgia athletics. You've got golf in the NCAA starting today. That's always a really fun thing. Big regional series for the softball team against Florida. Obviously, as Gator haters, we're rooting hard for the Dogs there. And coming up here really soon, the baseball team will also find out its fate when it comes to the NCAA tournament after being eliminated from the SECs by Ole Miss yesterday. So like a lot going on for UGA athletics here this weekend. Best of luck as those teams move through their own various NCAA tournaments. And as I mentioned to you off the top of the program, we'll be gone on Monday in observance of the holiday, but looking forward to be back with you on Tuesday after that. So what do you say as we wrap up here today? We do so in style. How about a Gator Hater roll call and a Golden Shoe Award winner? One of our great commenters and a guy who was with us last Friday for our DawgNation Days of Summer event there at the Battery Atlanta in Truist Park. Let me show you Mark Morris here on Twitter, who's living right there in the heart of Gator country in the state of Florida, he says. And he says, this is the sharpest mode of transportation around. For those of you watching on video, you can see this. It is a beautiful Georgia-themed golf cart. Boy, you love that. Yesterday, we mentioned the unathletic Gator that was mocked by Bank 6 in our Golden Shoe segment. He says, that unathletic Gator we saw earlier this week, that G would run him right off the road. So good stuff there by Mark Morris. You are our Golden Shoe winner. As we wrap up today, how about Gator Hater Countdown? 155 days. We will see you tomorrow, or should say Tuesday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. Have a great weekend, everybody. And on video, time now for R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all that for you. You're thinking about your air conditioning right now, though. I know that you are. And as you think about yours, trust R.S. Andrews to get it back to you for factory fresh specs. They'll make sure you stay cool all throughout the summer. I woke up. Sometimes you wake up sometimes in the middle of the night. I can't stand when I do that, but every now and then I do. And one of the things that helps me go back to sleep is when you feel that AC kind of wrapping around you. As I said before, us gentlemen of ample girth, we're always happy to have a lot of AC. And so I'm thankful the way that air conditioning kind of, keeps me cool at night, helps me go back to sleep after I wake up. So good stuff all the way around there. I have the YouTube pulled up first. I'll do some YouTube comments. We'll do some Facebook. Then we're going to get off the air here pretty soon because we're actually going to get on the road here a little bit. Scott Harris says, do you enjoy college baseball? That is what a pro farm system would do to football. Yeah, I mean, listen, I actually do enjoy college baseball, but that's obviously a sport that's had to, make some considerations and there's a lot of work around there when it comes to the pro sport stuff. I mean, obviously they have specific rules in place for that. And it's, kind of like following recruiting in baseball is always really tricky because obviously you have the long list of the top recruits in the country and the large assumption in the non-pandemic years, most of those guys will go on to play professionally, and many of them kind of do. It doesn't always happen, but many of them kind of do. Like the one point I've kind of made on all this, like I said before, I don't want to get too deep in all of this because it almost feels political. I will say that it's not perfectly drawn on political lines because you have different people from different perspectives kind of arguing across the party lines on this necessarily, but it feels political, so I want to be careful that we don't get too much into that. But like the one thing about the young talented athletes, I make this point all the time, there's really nowhere else other than college sports where they're earning a lot of fame, generating a lot of revenue, things along those lines. Like the NCAA has kind of quietly tried to argue that college sports is unique because people care about the colleges. And that seems like kind of a self-serving, almost like legalese type argument. The actual truth is I actually believe that to be true, that if you were, as somebody else said, one of our commenters a moment ago, if you take the college jersey off and you put like minor league football jersey on, the value of those games goes to the bottom. I mean, minor league baseball as a sport is struggling to survive. In fact, there are way fewer minor league teams now than there were just a couple of years ago. That is not a prolific business. Some minor league teams do well. Most of them don't. Many of them are kind of operating in the red, just struggling to even field a team from one year to the next. In fact, Major League Baseball essentially has to subsidize a lot of these teams just to even keep them afloat because they need somewhere to house their players. It is not big business, even though many of the players who play in minor league baseball will eventually become major leaguers who kids buy their jerseys and everything like that. Those guys, before they become the established stars, there's just almost no monetary, easily monetized, value for that really whatsoever. And you could say the same thing about, basketball. The fact that the competitors to pro football, spring leagues, things like that, the fact they can't seem to get off the ground, even though they would have easy access to football players to be able to do so. I just think you have to be really, really careful about this, that, something like college football wouldn't exist as long as it existed if it wasn't, by and large, serving people as entertainment, as job market, as, just sort of cultural touchstone. And I think you got to be really careful moving that kind of stuff around. Green Soldier says, how does CBS justify their head coach rankings? Name another young 5-year-less head coach who has done more than what Smart has done. Notre Dame would take Smart over Kelly in a heartbeat. I think that's a really good point. And, we kind of took the same tact around here, and Connor kind of wrote about this too, that, the number one argument for Kirby is the fact that he has beaten so many of the coaches who are ranked ahead of him. And the honest truth is, we know a lot of the CBS guys, and so we I'm sure they had fun with their ranking, but, to a certain extent, it is out there just for conversation fodder. And yeah, I did have a problem with Smart being ranked as low as he is, 7th on that list in comparison to Jimbo Fisher, who he beat in 2019. That's ahead of him. Brian Kelly's 5th. Smart's beat him twice, including in his own stadium. And by the way, Georgia was only 8-5 in 2016. The fact they went early September on the road, 2017. It seems, well, of course Georgia beat Notre Dame, in South Bend. But that's not exactly the way that game was kind of expected to go necessarily. Georgia had Notre Dame had not had a good season in 2016 either. But the point is, Georgia winning in South Bend in 2017 was one of the things that kind of started Georgia on a path towards eventually running through the SEC. So it was a big win for Georgia, in other words. It's 2 head-to-head wins against Brian Kelly, somebody that CBS ranks ahead. Dan Mullen's in the top 10. Smart's beaten him 3 times. Mullen, of course, beat him last year, but Smart's beaten him 3 times. So, yeah, I absolutely agree with you that I think that I shouldn't say we because none of us do this, they, media types, have a tendency to grade Smart on a very harsh curve because he's lost 3 times to Nick Saban. But most teams don't have to do that. I thought it was very instructive the other day. Do you remember when I mentioned the Pro Football Focus percentage chances of winning the various conferences? Georgia has about a 24% chance of winning the SEC. Now, who knows if that's right or not, but I'm assuming they just shouldn't, invent these numbers out of whole cloth. By comparison, Clemson better than 50% chance of winning the ACC. Oklahoma better than a 60% chance of winning the Big 12. These are teams that, for the most part, don't have to measure themselves against Alabama on a regular basis. Oklahoma lost Alabama in the playoff. To Clemson's credit, it's beaten Alabama in the college football playoff before a couple times. So to its credit, you have to say, they've been able to do that. But Clemson can win national championships, can certainly make the playoff without bumping into Alabama at all. And for Georgia, that's not quite the same thing. So I do wish there was more consideration made for the fact that if Georgia is the second best team in the SEC, they are very likely, one of the 4 best teams in the country. And, that's been kind of going on now with regularity. And I don't know that Smart's gotten his full credit for that necessarily. So I kind of agree with you on that. I know that kind of sounds homerish or whatever, but in this particular case, just because I want it to be true doesn't mean that it isn't. Let's see what else. Green Soldier says Jordan's on fire. It looks like we have another John Hammond in here, another Clemson fan in the comment section here today. Back over on the Facebook side of things for a moment. Gerald Harmon says if Georgia gets Robinson, I can see 2 of UGA's running backs going to the transfer portal. Yeah, Gerald, I understand where you're coming from on that. I just can't live my life in fear of that. Georgia's always going to be recruiting running backs. They're going to be looking to add backs to the locker room each and every year. And, clearly you would say, well, Robinson kind of has the look of a guy that could come in and play right away. But the truth is, other backs that Georgia's recruited kind of have that same kind of look there as well. So I just think you got to bring in talented players and let the chips fall where they may. And listen, I don't want to hold a guy, even though I'm a little bit skeptical of the transfer portal, I don't want to hold a guy hostage. If he feels like he's got a better chance of playing somewhere else, then maybe that's what he should do. But ultimately, I think, being less excited about adding a player because you feel like you might lose a player, that's not probably the mindset that I would advise people taking, because that's going to drive you crazy in this day and age, because you're going to have transfer portal issues potentially no matter what. I've always said before that what matters is who you're bringing into your program. You really can't control who exits your program, right? Whether they exit because of an injury, they exit because they go to the NFL, either on the basis of a good or bad decision, or because they choose to transfer out. There's a certain exodus from a program that you can do very little control. The thing that you have maximum control of, though, is the pipeline of talent you're bringing in. Sort of like anybody who's in sales understands this. Your closed deals, to a certain extent, are not fully in your control. But the pipeline of prospects, that very much is in your control. And that's the thing a good salesperson will zero in on. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to a college football roster as well. Who stays and who goes, a lot of that's not completely within Kirby Smart's grasp to control. But the pipeline of who he brings in is a lever that he can manipulate. And so continuing to keep that pipeline flowing, I think is a really, really important thing. Moose Thames asked about the no-show on Monday. Yeah, we're going to be off in honor of Memorial Day. My kids want to hit the road, so we're going to do that for a couple of days here. And we're going to let the folks who help us out enjoy some time off there as well. But look forward to being back again on Tuesday. Let's see what else. Phil Rogers and others talking about Georgia, Florida remaining in Jacksonville. Yeah, I mean, for now, that continues to be something that I'm in favor of. And I would suggest that the slight majority of Georgia fans are kind of in favor of that there as well. Let's get a couple more. Wendell Don LaRue says that Branson's a Nick Chubb type player in person. Yeah, really kind of comes across that way. Really kind of comes across that way. Tennille Calvino says, every male in my family dating back to the Revolutionary War has served in some branch of the military. She said, I'm truly grateful. That's a great thing to be able to hear. My dad was a Vietnam veteran. My grandfather on my mom's side was a Korean War veteran. My father's father was a World War II era veteran. So I've got a lot of that in my family there as well, and I'm really grateful for that. I talk about this a lot with our audience. There's so many either veterans or active duty service personnel that listen to our show, and I take that really serious. That means a ton to me to make sure I'm at my best, or as closely approximating my best as I can get to, knowing that so many people who check in on us, these are the people that protect our freedom. I mean, what an amazing thing that is. And I'm obviously kind of a different age where I guess where I did not serve, but to think about the ways in which so many of my dad's generation in Vietnam, think about how scary that was for my dad's parents. And I remember his mom, she would sometimes tell me those stories a little bit about just what that was like watching the news. And we kind of see some of this kind of through movies and things like that now, and how scared that she was just watching the news and all the stuff that was going on, and somewhat limited in the contact you're able to have, and it's just crazy. It's just crazy to think about not just him, but so many of the people he would have grown up with. In that era, just so many of our young people were over there in harm's way. Just an amazing sacrifice. And for those who have made that sacrifice, or for those of you, as we said a little earlier, who know people who lost their life in service to our country, what an awesome I guess thing that is to consider. And I mean awesome in terms of the weight of it. Obviously, our thoughts are with all of you as we honor Memorial Day here this weekend. Thank you, Van Bird. I appreciate that. Thank you, Van. I certainly appreciate that. Van said he served and lost friends in Iraq. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I'm so happy that Van is here with us. But as you said, when you're over there, you're going to serve with people who are going to pay that ultimate price, and that's something I would imagine that Van and others carry with them for the rest of their life. And I don't think we should, and certainly on this show we won't. I don't think you can discount the weight of all of that. And so as we enjoy ourselves, and we should, I'm looking forward to the weekend, but as we enjoy ourselves, keeping that in mind, that all of this we get to enjoy, came with a price tag. I just think that's a really important thing to do. Joel Moody says, I grew up in a military town, support and appreciate our military to the fullest. He says, do yourself a favor and pick up their bill at a restaurant. That's a great idea. Or simply say thank you when you see them in uniform. I always love those videos. I don't think I've ever actually seen this in person, but you see these videos from time to time where that, active duty military persons walking through the airport, and you see the applause. Sometimes they get moved up to first class and things like that. I always love seeing those videos and getting the time to appreciate that. And listen, when you do go up and thank somebody, I've had a chance to do this many times. It's always amazing how humble that person on the other side of that always is. These are people that are not necessarily looking for glory necessarily. They're just doing what they think is right, and it's always a really fun, interesting conversation because these are people who've made, we have, exclusively voluntary military, these days. These are people who've made a very specific choice, and it's certainly a very interesting choice. Green Soldier over here as well on the YouTube side of things. Thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that. He also says to tell Connor to take over on Monday and do the show in my place. I don't think Connor's looking forward to being here on Memorial Day, probably either on that. By the way, John Hammond with the Clemson Tiger Paw says that Trevor Lawrence will turn Tim Tebow into a Pro Bowl tight end. That's quite a provocative take. I'm sure that'll get people stirred up. DeMarco Thomas, also a vet. So, DeMarco, thanks for being here, and certainly thank you for your service to our country. Ed Houston says that his son was in the Army. Christopher Rule says he wasn't necessarily the smartest tool in the shed. He joined the Marine Corps. Yeah, that's quite a basic training that you go through there. I guess Parris Island on this side of the country, Camp Pendleton on the other side of the country. That's quite a basic training you go through there for sure. Scott Harris says 99 days to light up Bank of America Stadium. Can't wait for that. Yeah, boy, it's going to be here before you know it. I love seeing all the excitement starting to build, not just for the Georgia Clemson game, but just the general excitement around, the start of the college football season as well. You really start to feel some energy around that this time of year. Brandon Griffin, looking forward to seeing Ladd McConkey. That's a fun thing to think about. All right, we're going to get ready to go. Let me take one or two more comments before we do. Bill Sanders says the last full measure of devotion, which is a beautiful way to describe that, and no question about that. All right, we are going to get ready to wrap up here for today, so hope all of you are heading towards an enjoyable weekend. Let me remind you to check out the AJC there as well. Atlanta Journal-Constitution online, ajc.com. And boy, there's a lot going on in the sports world to pay attention to. Obviously, Braves continuing to roll through here. Hawks, all kinds of drama around, the Hawks and the Knicks here. That's turned into be kind of a fun little rivalry thing in a way that you might imagine. And obviously, the Hawks looking to bounce back after. It's interesting. I'll just say this really quick. I was always a big Budenholzer fan when he was the coach of the Hawks, but obviously he hurt Atlanta in the playoffs a little bit by not really changing the substitution pattern, and then lo and behold, you're kind of here with Nate McMillan this year, and you feel like McMillan's doing some of the same things that Bud kind of got in trouble for with the Hawks years ago. So maybe they can figure that out, and maybe Nate McMillan can make some different decisions as you head towards Game 3. But obviously a really fun series playing out right now between the Hawks and the Knicks. Big-time coverage of that online at ajc.com as well. Of course, and I think that we may see something kind of happen on this over the course of the next couple of days with the Atlanta Falcons and what they're going to do with Julio Jones, the trade. ESPN is reporting the Atlanta has a first-round pick available to it for Julio. I think if that was true, Atlanta would have already made the trade. But we'll see if that indeed does turn out to be true, or if that rumor, kind of brings some more buying power to the table for Atlanta here as it looks to move on from Julio Jones. Our buddy D-Led and the entire staff of the AJC got a lot for you on that, plus a bunch of things to do around the Atlanta area here this weekend. So ajc.com, also a great place to go for that. Atlanta Journal-Constitution online at ajc.com. Hope you have a great weekend. Once again, big thanks to R.S. Andrews for help keeping us cool this time of year on the cool down and in our homes there as well. Find them online at rsandrews.com if you need some help with your air conditioning unit, whether it's finding time to be replaced or if you just want to see if you can get a little bit more life out of that system. R.S. Andrews can help you out with that. rsandrews.com. Enjoy the weekend. Keep in mind the meaning behind the day. We'll see you back here again on Tuesday for DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We will look forward to talking to you then. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.